For over 70 years, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Marin has worked to inspire joy and justice in an imperfect world, sharing life's journey, celebrating many paths, and acting to make a difference. UU Marin celebrates people from all walks of life. No matter how you make your living or how you experience the sacred, no matter who you are, where you're from, or who you love, you are welcome here. If you're seeking open-hearted community, a place where you can have a real day-to-day impact in the world, and a space for the whole family to grow spiritually, come check out the church at the top of the hill. Come join UU Marin.
Air smelled like freedom, but it also smelled like rain, which freckled CJ's shirt and dripped down his nose. He ducked under his Nana's umbrella, saying, "How come we gotta wait for the bus in all this rain?" Trees get thirsty too, his Nana told him. "Don't you see that big one slipping through a straw?" CJ looked for a long time, but he never saw a straw. From the bus stop, he watched the water pool on flower petals, watched rain patter against the windshield of a nearby car. His friend Colby climbed in, gave CJ a wave, and drove off with his dad. "Nana, how come we don't got a car?" "Boy, what do we need a car for? We got a bus that breathes fire, and old Mr. Dennis, who always has a trick for you." The bus creaked to a stop in front of them. It sighed and sagged, and the doors swung open. "What's that I see?" Mr. Dennis said. He pulled a coin from behind CJ's ear and placed it in his palm. Nana laughed her deep laugh and pushed CJ along. They sat right up front. The man across the way was tuning a guitar. An old woman with curlers had butterflies in a jar. Nana gave everyone a great big smile and a good afternoon. She made sure that CJ did the same. The bus lurched forward and stopped, lurched forward and stopped, and Nana hummed as she knit. "How come we always gotta go here after church?" CJ said. "Miguel and Colby never have to go anywhere." "I feel sorry for those boys," she told him. "They'll never get the chance to meet Bobo or the sunglasses man, and I hear Trixie got herself a brand new hat." CJ stared out the window, feeling sorry for himself. He watched cars zip by on either side and watched a group of boys hop curbs on bikes. A man climbed aboard with a spotted dog. CJ gave up his seat. "How come that man can't see?" "Boy, what do you know about seeing?" Nana told him. "Some people watch the world with their ears." "That's a fact. Their noses too," said the man, sniffing at the air. "That's a mighty fine perfume you're wearing today, ma'am." Nana squeezed the man's hand and laughed her deep laugh. Two older boys got on next. CJ watched as they moved on by and stood in the back. "I wish I had one of those," he said. And Nana set down her knitting. "What for? You got the real-life thing sitting across from you. Why don't you ask the man if he'll play us a song?" But CJ didn't have to. The guitar player was already plucking strings and beginning to sing. "To feel the magic of music," the blind man whispered, "I like to close my eyes." Nana closed hers too. So did CJ and the spotted dog. And in the darkness, the rhythm lifted CJ out of the bus, out of the busy city. He saw sunset colors swirling over crashing waves, saw a family of hawks slicing through the sky, dancing free in the light of the moon. CJ's chest grew full, and he was lost in the sound, and the sound gave him the feeling of magic. The song ended, and CJ opened his eyes. Everyone on the bus clapped, even the boys in back. Nana glanced at the coin in CJ's palm, and CJ dropped it in the man's hat. "Last stop on Market Street," Mr. Dennis called. CJ looked around as he stepped off the bus. Crumbling sidewalks and broken down doors, graffiti-tagged windows and boarded-up stores. He reached for his Nana's hand. "How come it's always so dirty over here?" She smiled and pointed to the sky. "Sometimes, when you're surrounded by dirt, CJ, you're a better witness for what's beautiful." CJ saw the perfect rainbow arching over their soup kitchen. He wondered how his Nana always found beautiful where he never even thought to look. He looked around at them again, and the bus rounding the corner out of sight, and the broken street lamps still lit up bright, and the stray cat shadows moving across the wall. When he spotted the familiar faces in the window, he said, "I'm glad we came." He thought his Nana might laugh her deep laugh, but she didn't. She patted him on the head and told him, "Me too, CJ. Now, come on." You could join us in singing the children to their classes. The words are in your order of service.
So I have a feeling that when you look at me, your first thought might not be, oh, she looks like a surfer chick. That's for good reason. I'm decidedly not a surfer chick, but it's not for lack of trying. When I was around 30, I went on a trip to Hawaii, to the land of surfer chicks and surfer dudes. And being a rather confident person, I decided to give surfing a try. It seemed doable, and honestly, I kind of liked that cool image. I kind of wanted to add surfer to my list of life skills. So I signed up for a surf lesson on Poipu Beach. My instructor was most definitely a surfer dude, direct from Central Casting. After some time spent learning and practicing some basics with my surfboard on the sand, we hit the water. I studied the waves. I paddled hard. I tried to catch several waves. It was not easy. But eventually, I saw my wave, and I went for it. And lo and behold, I caught it. I popped myself up, and I rode that wave toward the beach. It was exhilarating. I was doing it. I was having my surfer girl moment. And then the reality hit me that I didn't know how to stop this thing. But I clearly remembered my surf instructor's words. Whatever you do, do not fall on the coral, dude. Yeah, okay, got it. So I rode that wave over the coral, watching its jagged edges flow beneath my surfboard. But that beach was quickly approaching. Do I jump off? Do I just ride up onto the sand? It may seem obvious to any experienced surfers out here, but I really didn't know the proper technique. And unfortunately, I chose wrong. I rode my surfboard right into the sand. And that certainly stopped the ride, quite abruptly. I was launched into the air in a torpedo-like swan dive, and I landed on that hard-packed sand with an audible pop in my neck. I couldn't breathe. I had knocked the wind out of myself. I honestly thought I may have killed myself, or at least have done serious damage to myself. I remember wiggling my fingers and then my toes and feeling such relief to discover that I still could do it. I slowly dragged myself out of the surf with sand packed in my ears and up my nose and everywhere else it could be packed. And I glanced around, hoping that there were no witnesses to my folly. Alas, there was this one guy hanging out a few yards away, and he kind of stared at me. And he said, "That must have hurt," before he wandered off. And I spent the rest of that surf session recovering on the beach. So it was on that day that a part of my personal story became, I am not a surfer. I have told that story countless times to my friends and families, as people ask me, "Hey, do you surf? You live in California now?" No, I'm not a surfer. Fast forward to last summer. My son and I were in Costa Rica, another place known for its friendly surf vibe. A friend that I was with asked if I wanted to do a surf lesson with her. "Oh no," I said, "I am not a surfer." I told her my story, and she kind of looked at me sideways and said, "Okay, well, just think about it." And I was actually surprised that I did think about it, and I was even more surprised when I agreed to join her the next day. "What made you change your mind?" she asked. I told her I had thought about it, and I kind of wanted to see if this non-surfer story was still true for me. So you can probably see where this is going. I ended up having an incredible surf experience that day. My instructor taught me the basics again and helped me catch many waves. And I wiped out over and over, but I didn't get hurt. I surfed again and again. I was exhilarated and exhausted after a 90-minute session. I had a moment of true understanding about the power of surfing. I felt that spiritual connection to the ocean in a way I had never had before. And for the first time, I understood why some people actually build their lives around chasing waves and communing with the ocean. Now, Don't worry, I have no current plans to start a surf school in Costa Rica, but I ended that day with a different understanding of myself, and with a bit of regret for the nearly 20 years that I had believed a story about myself that wasn't totally accurate. That story that I was not a surfer was based on one bad experience. And by telling and retelling that story to my family and friends, I had written it nearly permanently on my heart. But who really cares? It's just surfing. It's no big deal either way. Perhaps. But the experience has been a catalyst for some deeper soul searching. It has started me on a bit of a quest to re-examine the stories of my life. What are the stories I tell about myself? What are they based on? Are they still true? Are they valid? Since this summer rewrite of my surf story, I've discovered a few other stories about myself that are a bit wobbly and deserve another look. Here are just a few that I'm re-examining right now. One, the story that I am extremely introverted. Yes, I am introverted, but I think there might be a bit of an extrovert lurking inside somewhere. Another story is this idea that I'm no good at learning languages. And actually, I have been learning Spanish for almost 8 months now. Y cada día yo aprendo más. It's so exciting. Another story is I can't keep plants alive. I have a brown thumb. Well, actually, I'm proud to report that I have a few scraggly orchids that are managing to stay alive despite my best efforts. There have even been some reblooms, and if you have orchids, you know what that means. It's an accomplishment. So yes, stories are powerful, and they can be so fun to tell. But does that make them true? For me, I'm kind of having some fun actually reconsidering these stories of my life. My life is not a final draft. My stories aren't written in stone. I want to be aware of the power of my stories to empower me or to limit me if I'm not careful. I want to remain open to the possibility that I may be a surfer chick yet. Thank you.
Wow, that's rock. That's a lovely song. Susan gave me a heads up on it, so I'm able to tie it into the sermon. It tells the story of Bonnie Prince Charlie, who sailed away from his defeat to the Isle of Skye back in 1745, rather a long time ago. Charlie had attempted to restore his Catholic father to the British throne, and he believed that many of both the Scots and the English would support his cause. But the uprising failed quite miserably, however, and he fled back to Rome via the Isle of Skye. And partisans, the Scottish partisans, sang, "Charlie will come again," in the original version of this song, which envisioned, oh, he'll come again, there'll be a successful attempt, and they will win that war, that battle. But then Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the words that we just heard our friends sing, because he knew that Charlie would not come again, that his cause was lost. And of course, without knowing the future, that young man wouldn't have known whether their defeat was the end of his plans or just a bump in the road on the way to victory. But yeah, defeats, losses of all sorts can be really depressing. Yeah? We can feel that we have lost not only hope and joy, but some essential part of ourselves. The lad is gone, no longer merry. And he sings, "All that was me was gone." Nice poetry and a beautiful song. But Prince Charlie's story will continue, although he will never be quite as bonny again. He was still himself, however. He was still the main character, even with the different narrators of his story and his song. That lad is not gone, but he has been forced to grow up. Now I'm going to share some words from my story, an important story to me. They're from Thomas Wolfe's Look Homeward Angel. Some of you have probably read that. It's the very beginning. A stone, a leaf, an unfound door. A stone, a leaf, a door. And of all the forgotten faces. Naked and alone we came into exile. In her dark womb we did not know our mother's face. From the prison of her flesh have we come into the unspeakable and incommunicable prison of this earth. Which of us has known his brother? Which of us has looked into his father's heart? Which of us has not remained forever prison pent? Which of us is not forever a stranger and alone? Oh, waste of loss! In the hot mazes, lost among the bright stars on this weary, unbright cinder, lost. Remembering speechlessly, we seek the great forgotten language, the lost lane end into heaven, a stone, a leaf, an unfound door. Where, when, O lost and by the wind grieved, ghost, come back again. I read that book when I was in high school. I read it more than once, actually. The introduction that I just read was the best part for me, capturing at least the sometimes frustrating search for the meaning of our lives, the attempts to understand our stories. And of course, I felt a lot of alienation back then as a teenager. I think many people experienced that at their time in their lives and other times in their lives. So reading that, I thought, but maybe, just maybe, I could find that lost lane into heaven. If only I kept trying. It must be there somewhere. Oh, lost and by the wind grieve, ghost, come back again and tell me what to do. Hello. And it's similar to the plea in the song. Give me the lad that's gone. It's loss. Now, shifting gears a little bit, Socrates may have said, I mean, who knows? He was like even longer ago than Bonnie Prince Charlie. He said that an unexamined life is not worth living. And I'm not at all sure of that truth of that. I think animals' lives are worth living, and I'm not sure they examine them quite the way we do. But I do know that some self-reflection can really enhance one's life. At least it has mine. Our own James Luther Adams said almost the same thing when he said, an unexamined faith is not worth having, for it can only be true by accident. A faith worth having is worth discussing and testing. Yep. Our Unitarian Universalist faith is not an easy one, but I believe it is one worth having. It certainly has been for me. And the words in our opening hymn describe most of what that faith means to me. Wake now, my vision, my ministry, my compassion. Our lives, for most of us anyway, almost all of us, they're pretty complicated stories. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what the plot actually is. Anybody, ever wonder if there was a plot to your life? And we can spend a lot of time just wandering around lost, falling off surfboards, searching for answers. And a lot of times we're just trying to get by, day to day, deal with what comes and, feed the kids and go to work and put out the garbage and remember to recycle. And I've never been able to predict the future. I've hopes for the future, I can't predict it. And I'm not sure we can do that, really. We can't, there's too many random influences of events, people who are not under our control, and they're going to change our lives and our story. And we don't write the narrative, our own lives, I think. We can interact with it. When Emily shared with me what she was going to say this morning, it brought to mind one of my experiences back in, I think it was junior high. A friend of mine's family invited me to go water skiing with them on this nearby lake. And I tried it, and I forgot a fundamental thing of, I fell immediately, of course, and I didn't let go of the rope. Nobody told me you gotta let go of the rope. And so I held on. And I'm still not I've never tried it again. I'm not as brave as Emily. But, when I think about that, it's like, what's the lesson? You hold on tight, but when you have to let go, you let go. And I think I've learned that. I mean, I can be steady and stay with somebody for 50 plus years. Despite the turbulence of the water. For those that don't know, that's my spouse over there, laughing. This wasn't in the draft that she read. Just saying. Yeah, she would have edited it out. I'm sorry, I'm getting way off track. Okay. Take a breath. I've done a lot of examining my life by looking backwards. Because I found it helps me understand how I got to where I am now and how I got to be who I am now. And somehow that process has helped me adapt and change as I've needed to. It's brought me some self-awareness and understanding of others as well, but mostly it has given me a giant sense of humility. I mean, there for the grace of God, that phrase, however you define God, has a lot of meaning. A lot of stuff is random. And so, how often, when faced with a decision, do we wonder what will come from that choice, from whatever choice we make? Will our decisions be the right ones? Is there really a right decision to make? Do we choose risk or safety? Is one better than the other? I don't have any answers to those questions. You're going to have to figure out them for yourselves what you think about that as you live out your personal stories. The quote from the Reverend Karen Quinlan, she says, "More often, I'm learning that true change happens only when we take the time and risk of sitting with something hard. True change in the world is intimately related to our internal transformation, which is intimately related to our presence to ourselves. Culture is simply everything that's around us. At some point in our lives, hopefully at least, she didn't say hopefully, I said that, we learn that there are other ways of being. Our human tendency is to think that our way is better than theirs. And when we are white, thinking that ours is better is supported by the fact that our social and political systems have been built through the same frame through which we're looking. We learn that our way is the right way and the best way. Simply put, this is white supremacy culture." She also says, "Come on and look inside you. It's the best place to start. The greatest revolution is a simple change of heart." Now, the reality of racism in this country in particular has never been hidden. But many white folks, including myself, are beginning to understand it a little bit better. Part of it is learning that other people's stories are just as real as our own. I understood racism and my own engagement with white supremacy culture by looking back at my own life and trying to understand my own story. I grew up in Watsonville, California, relatively small, primarily agricultural town. And unlike many white people who grew up in racially segregated suburbs, the town was actually very ethnically diverse, and I was aware of that from an early age. Many of my friends' parents were first-generation immigrants, and English was their second language, if they spoke it at all. Our next-door neighbor, who took care of me while my mother worked, spoke mainly Portuguese. And I remember my mother explaining when I was very young that the town was settled by waves of immigrants who came mainly to work on the farms. Italians, Slavonians, Portuguese, Germans, Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, Okies, and Mexicans were the group she mentioned. There weren't a lot of black people in the town. Most of the migration in that time period, African Americans had already been rural and were more excited to move for the shipyards or the cities than the small agricultural towns. Everyone had an ethnicity of some sort, in my mother's opinion, and she used it to describe virtually everyone she knew. Phyllis was my Chinese friend. John, who lived behind us, was Slavonian. David was my Jewish friend, and I was named after my mother's German friend, Theresa. And I remember asking her what we were. She said we were Okies. She'd moved from Texas to California in the 1930s to find work as a waitress in Hollywood. So that was the group she did identify with, even though it was Texas, not Oklahoma. Do any of you remember Jordan Edwards? It was a while ago. He was the young African-American teenager who was killed by the police in Texas in the spring of 2017. He was only 15 and had been at a party with his brothers and some other friends. And then someone shouted, "The police are coming, the cops are coming." So they got in their car and tried to leave. An officer shot at the departing car, and Jordan was killed by a bullet to his head. Say his name, Jordan Edwards. His story impacted me deeply because when I was a teenager, I went to a friend's party, and some of the kids were drinking, and my friend's parents called the cops. And somebody said, "The cops are coming." So all these white kids got in our cars and tried to get away. And in a panic, my friend David backed his car into a muddy field, and we got stuck for more than a few minutes. David was a truly terrible driver, I hate to tell you. He drove a cab later in New York, but in Watsonville, no, bad news. But we managed to get the car out, and we got away. And we were scared, but because we were white, our lives were never at risk. The worst case scenario would have been a phone call to our parents and being grounded. That was white supremacy culture at work in my favor, although I did not realize it at the time. I was not totally unaware of racism as a teen, however. My U.S. history teacher in high school, Mr. Hashimoto, had been interned with his family during World War II when he was a child, and he talked about that on more than one occasion in class. And he also told us that it was because of racism that the U.S. dropped the atom bomb on Japan rather than on Germany. He taught me how to question things, and he had a different story than what was told in our textbooks. In college, although I had the opportunity to hear Eldridge Cleaver, Angela Davis, Bobby Seale, and other Black Panthers speak during those, I went to college in 1968. They were turbulent times too. But college was the first time I was exposed to a pretty monolithic white middle class culture. Almost everyone in my dorm was white, and most of them came from upper middle class white suburbs. White supremacy became the water I swam in. I saw the class issues pretty clearly because I was a scholarship student, but my social life was almost completely white, and I was really kind of clueless about that fact. I mean, we were all for racial justice, but we didn't really know any Black people at all, really. And one thing I've learned over time is that while ideals and values are good things, you can't really know someone else until you take the time to listen and to understand that yours is not the only story that is true. I learned so much during my 25 years working for the Social Security Administration in Richmond, California. It's a processing center with almost 2,000 employees when I started anyway. And it was something like 40% African American with a good mix of other ethnic groups. White people were definitely not in the majority. And what that meant is that the people of color there sometimes felt safe enough to talk about race and racism openly. Some of you probably don't remember the O.J. Simpson trial. Some of you do. Some of the younger people may not. He was a football player, African American, with a white wife, and he was on trial for her murder. And people, during their breaks and lunch, they'd talk about the trial at work. And most of the white folks were convinced he was guilty, and most of the Black folks wanted him to be freed. When the verdict was announced and he was found innocent or not guilty, all the Black people just cheered. A Black man accused of killing a white woman was declared innocent. What a historic event. Something that rarely happens when you live under the thumb of a racist culture. I learned something very real about the reality of Black lives and the different stories we carry with us. Because, the white women, and there were a lot of women it was mainly female, quite frankly, lower grade employees. That's what we were. The white women saw O.J. as just yet another abusive husband who murdered his wife and got away with it. And while the black women saw another innocent black man like Emmett Till. Both stories, my friends, were true. And I couldn't argue with either of them. All I could do was listen. Now, maybe that individual case has facts, but the stories that people heard, their lives that were present in that moment, were both so very true. And I had another conversation with a black coworker and shared with her a lay sermon that Ann and I wrote back in the early 90s when we first came here. And we talked about how we created our family as a lesbian parents. And it was my very first sermon, and Ann doesn't remember me doing any of it, but we shared it. I did part, she did another part. Anyway, my friend at work, she cried when she read our story. And she told me that she thought her church, which I think was AME, she thought her church was wrong about how they treated gay people. And then she told me a story of hers. She went to a sleepover camp when she was about 9 or 10, and she was the only black child there. And she couldn't swim very well. All the other kids at camp had swam out to a platform on a lake, and she was alone on the shore. So she gathered up her strength and her courage, and she swam as best she could out to that platform. She was exhausted when she got there, but when she tried to get on the platform to rest, the other kids wouldn't let her. And I'm not sure if they used the N-word or not. She may have told me, but I don't remember. She didn't, she cried again. She told me about almost drowning as she struggled to make her way back to shore. I was so honored that she trusted me enough to share that story. I did not make any excuses for the kids who had been mean to her. I just cried with her. Conversations about race, about any sort of difference or disagreement can be difficult. They can be uncomfortable. It's okay if they're uncomfortable. I do believe it's easier, however, if those conversations can be contained in some type of mutual covenant, whether it's the bonds of friendship, common purpose, values, or love, as in a relationship or partnership. And here at UU Marin, we have a covenant of right relations where we promise to respect others, their person, ideas, and spiritual theological beliefs. We promise to speak the truth with love, care, and sensitivity, to listen carefully, respond with respect, and act with kindness. And this container can, I think, help us have those difficult conversations while we stay together as a community. We can love alike without necessarily thinking alike. If we can live into that covenant, maybe we can hear each other's stories. Finding the resonances when we can, surfing, water skiing, the sad stories, the hard stories, the trials. And if we can hold that container, we can share our own life's journey without fear of judgment, We can be transformed by what we really listen to with our hearts. And we can also learn both courage and some humility when we come to understand that listening or being listened to doesn't mean we agree. It's okay to not agree. And yeah, speak your truth. Speak from your heart. But people can hear that, and their story might be different, and they may not agree with you on whether or not OJ should have gone free. No one has the whole truth, ever. We're all just searching for that lost lane into heaven, doing the best we can, imperfectly, in this very, 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 very imperfect world. Amen, and blessed be you.